Things.
Okay, we're about to be live streaming. I'm just going to go over to YouTube and grab the link to share.
Alrighty. There, how's my video look?
Hopefully pretty good because we're live.
There. Okay, now we're good.
All right.
Had myself upside down for a while there.
Okay. I'm just grabbing the link for the Facebook group.
Not quite sure why it's so dark suddenly. Alrighty. So in this scenario, we just use the Facebook comments. People will ask questions in Facebook via the comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll be able to play the video on Facebook.
Okay.
And it's a live stream, so we'll just keep an eye on the comments over there. And let me go back to you. And
so this is okay. So I see people are commenting, or somebody's commenting.
I think that's me.
Oh. Yeah.
So everybody, we're about to get started. I'm just going to close down a few extra tabs here. And let me get the Facebook message box where I can see it. And we'll get this party started.
Oh, you're on YouTube.
Yeah, we're streaming through YouTube via Zoom. It's kind of complicated, but that's what worked today.
Yep.
So I'm just going to pin this post to the top. All right, everybody watching, let's get this started. All right, Amy's here. All right. Hello and welcome everybody to this live stream. I'm Chris Badgett from LifterLMS, and I've got Dennis Hall here from Learning Templates. How you doing, Dennis?
I'm doing fine.
And we're going to get into some great topics and conversations around xAPI, LifterLMS xAPI, what it is, what it's all about, what problems it solves. We're going to have a little bit of a history lesson because a lot of people don't necessarily understand what it does and what it's for and, you know, kind of where it came from and if it might be relevant to you. So originally we were going to run this through the BeLive service, but we were having some issues. So we're actually using Zoom to live stream through YouTube to Facebook. And the reason we're not live streaming directly from Facebook is because we wanted to have two side-by-side people talking here, which we're able to do with Zoom and streaming it to YouTube that way. And you can't really stream into a Facebook group, or at least I couldn't figure out how to do it through Zoom. So, but anyways, that's just the technical details of live streaming with different apps. So Amy, I see your comment there. We have a post in the LifterLMS Facebook group. It's a pin post, which means it'll stick to the top if you go back and refresh that page. And what Dennis and I are going to do is we're going to keep an eye on the comments of that pin post to if you have any questions. As we get into this conversation, we'll have the comments open on that. I can see Sean commenting. Awesome. Thank you for letting us know that's working. So yeah, we're streaming through YouTube, but we're going to have the conversation over here on Facebook in the Facebook group. So let's get into it. So LifterLMS, Dennis helped me understand a while back actually that is it's not just an LMS, it's an LCMS, which is a learning content management system, which what we can weave into the conversation later. But I always appreciated Dennis's ability to help, educate around different things with all his experience in the e-learning industry and his experience with different WordPress LMS systems, and being around the different authoring tools, being around xAPI and other things related to all this. But I kind of want to start it off with just some of the a little bit of history, and some people get a little bit intimidated by the jargon or the words like tin can or xAPI. What does that mean? Can you give us a little history lesson, Dennis, on where did the experience API come from? It's also called the xAPI. It's also called the tin can API. What does it do, and what is the short history lesson there?
Sure, Chris. Well, to understand the benefits of xAPI, what problems it's solving, you've got to understand what the problems were in the past. The history of online learning has been around since the late 80s, mid 90s. And the initial evolution of providing the ability to share e-learning over the internet started out with a specification called AICC, and it was designed primarily for the airline industry. But the Department of Defense in the U.S. had picked it up and actually started a group. AICC was great. It allowed you to put a e-learning course out on a server and share that amongst multiple LMS systems. So that was really cool, because you could, at that point, sell your single course to many different clients, and they could run that course from your server on their LMS. So that was really cool. Eventually, industry wanted to have a little more. So industry basically started pressuring for a new standard, and that standard was called SCORM. SCORM went through many different evolutions over time, and SCORM finally stopped being developed. The specification stopped being further developed in 2013. And the reason that it stopped being developed was because the world was changing. People were on their cell phones and on their tablets starting to learn. And the problem with SCORM was that it was purely browser-based, and you had to remain connected to the learning management system in order to use the course. As soon as your mobile device disconnected, you were basically, your training records were gone. I'm sure we've all seen that kind of thing in the past, even in our own experiences working for other people, working in companies. So essentially, that was a serious issue. And no matter what iteration of SCORM, no matter how much SCORM evolved, there was still that restriction, two restrictions. One of it being only learning in the browser, and secondly, you always having to be connected to the learning management system. With xAPI, this took the benefits of AICC, the ability to have a single course run on multiple LMSs, and it took the restrictions of SCORM and removed those while keeping the benefits of AICC. So now what you have today is you have xAPI. Now, the X means experience, and API is simply application programmer's interface. So it's a bit of a technical term, so they called it tin can to make it a little nicer sounding. But essentially, we now have a scenario where you can take your learning on the road with you, be disconnected off the internet, continue to learn in your course, in your e-learning, And then later when you reconnect to the internet, you will synchronize your data with with what is called a learning record store. Now that is not part of your LMS. Even if there are different variations of learning record stores, some can be installed on the same server as your learning management system. And some, whereas others are much more of for lack of a better term, I'll simply say they're a lot more powerful. They have a lot more ability to deal with big data. And these learning record stores are always offshored from your server. They're never sitting on your server, unless you've got, you know, the server from heaven, right, where it's got unlimited power, unlimited disk space. Beyond that, though, these type of systems will typically be a server sitting outside. So it becomes an ecosystem where you've got, for example, your data storage and your reporting wind up on the learning record store, and they're outside your LMS so that people, whether they're online or offline, can continue to communicate with that device or sync up with that device when they get back online. Then your LMS is at that point not being bogged down by big data happening. So for example, if I've got a course with 100 pages made with Articulate Storyline or with Lectora or with Captivate, whatever it be, that course of 100 pages might produce upwards of 150 records into the Learning Record Store database. If that happens, that's happening in a very quick time. So what that's doing is that's bringing down the ability for that database to deal with other things, unless it's a dedicated server just for that purpose. Picture your LMS serving 100 users, and let's say that 20 of them are suddenly reconnecting and syncing up data. If you're just on a standard hosting plan, you are about to sync your server. Okay, your learning management system is going to suffer in performance during that period. This is why you want to offboard xAPI data. But again, one thing about xAPI is it's designed to be an open source scenario. When I say open source, I don't necessarily mean free. I mean open architecture scenario, so that you can, if you choose, to have a local learning record store, or you can, if you choose, to have a remote learning record store. No matter how you assemble your total picture, you have choices everywhere, and that opens the door for you to go out and use product from company A and product from company B and application for cell phone company C and course from e-learning developer company D, and use your own LMS and mix it all together, and you've got all kinds of different possibilities. So the fact that you've got all these possibilities could never happen in SCORM. The end.
Gotcha. So one of the big differentiators of xAPI is that you can take it offline, right?
Yes.
And that's huge. That's huge. And you're saying that an LRS really comes in handy when the data starts getting massive, and do you really want to hold all that data on your own website? And the other interesting thing is you can have multiple LMSs and other xAPI enabled situations reporting back to a central LRS. It's not just about your website. So this is like a much more versatile context for e-learning.
Yes, it is. Beyond that, by the way, it's not just the LRS that can be shared amongst various clients' LMSs. You can also store your courses. Like if you do external e-learning and you upload it and use it in your LMS, you can also rent that e-learning out to other clients with their LMS. As long as their LMS can communicate xAPI, you now also have the ability to have one course published centrally, and you're sharing that amongst multiple clients, and they can be writing their reporting data to their LRSs. It doesn't have to go to LRS.
Yeah, which is very cool. And what, just for the person listening who's kind of getting up to speed on the basic terms here. What is an authoring tool like that works with xAPI? And in the WordPress world, for us, our authoring tool is the lesson post type, and we have a little text editor. We can put images and Vimeo or YouTube or Wistia video links and downloads and stuff. But that's our authoring tool, and it can do a lot. But what do like these authoring tools like Captivate, Storyline, Lectora, what do they do?
Yeah, good question. First, let's just also include xAPI in your authoring tool. Because
yeah, that's true.
xAPI, your post types are also xAPI enabled, along with that third-party e-learning. So let's talk about the most popular product worldwide right now for e-learning development, being Articulate Storyline, whether it be Storyline 2, well, Storyline 1, 2, or 360, or Articulate 360 as the whole package. Because you've also got Rise in there, which is now xAPI enabled with Articulate 360. But essentially, you wind up with a bunch of e-learning development environments. And that's what the authoring tool is. It's an environment that will typically run on your Windows or Mac PCs. And what that environment does is allow you to create rich learning environments or rich learning products that have a lot more options available within them for quizzing, for surveys, for presenting various media formats, and as well as for providing detailed learning information to the learning record stores.
That's awesome. And
I will also add, by the way, earlier you had mentioned, the large data and such, and that is really important that you do mention that, because learning record stores can create large amounts of data. With large amounts of data, for everyone's information, comes large amounts of reporting data. So when you want to run a report and you have 30,000, 50,000 records to run a report from, you're going to wind up using more processing power from your server or from your learning management system if you've got reporting only built into that. Processing power from your server or from your learning management system if you've got
Dennis, you still with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, it just froze for a second. Amy in the audience, you're saying that you really enjoy Storyline. I was wondering if you could raise your hand if you don't mind coming on and just sharing on this, like how you use Storyline and what you like about it, so that and when you would use it over WordPress. I think it would be cool for some people to hear that. Also, I think that one of the neat things when you start getting into authoring tools, which I've learned from you, Dennis, is you can kind of create an entire course with an authoring tool, but you can also just create some really a really neat individual lesson, and maybe the other lessons are just regular, like kind of WordPress video lessons, but then you get to this, fancier, interactive, rich lesson that is actually developed by an authoring tool that's on it's on the learning sequence of the course, correct?
That is correct. I will add as well, by the way, we've been talking about learning authoring tools that are external to LifterLMS. With LifterLMS xAPI, you also have the ability to have the native H5P content writing to LifterLMS xAPI. And what I'm just coming out with now is what I'm just working on now is the next iteration of LifterLMS xAPI, where the H5P content will control the mark complete button in a lesson. And when I talk about that, all third-party uploaded or linked e-learning will also, they already do control the mark complete button by your choice. We have a few people in this online meeting today that currently use LifterLMS xAPI, and they could probably chime in and let us know what their experience might be.
Yeah, Amy was just saying that here's one way she uses Storyline, that she records a short screencast, then at the click of a button, Storyline will convert the video into separate slides, each with their own prompts, so the student can walk through the software. So basically, if you want, like a video, it just kind of plays. And yeah, there's a pause button, but Amy is creating a progression through slides where people can really go at their own pace. And I'm sure you can add more interactivity on top of that if you want. Let's talk about H5P a little bit.
Sure.
H5P is more for like somebody who's into content creation and they want more interactive content. Can you define like what kinds of interaction we're talking about? What can you do above publishing a video or an audio?
H5P, if you actually go to h5p.org, which is their website, you're going to see, in fact, if I would need to even look at my own development platform just to remember.
I'm going to put a link in the chat here. Yeah, it's amazing all the stuff you can do with it.
Well, you have so many different types of interactions with H5P that I don't recall all of them. I've actually got them all I've got one course of nothing but H5P interactions. And I'll just give me a moment so I can count the number of lessons. I had, for my testing, I had put one H5P interaction into each lesson. So if you just give me a moment, I'm just going to filter my lessons. And I'll be able to tell you how many lessons, how many H5P interactions there are as far as quantity goes.
I'm just gonna, while you're looking for that, I'm just gonna call out some of the things I see on their site. They have these accordions you can add, something called an agamotto, which creates a sequence of images that gradually change. You can do a math arithmetic quiz, you can do an audio recorder, you can do a chart, you can do a collage, dialogue cards, a course presentation, which I think might be similar to what Amy was talking about with slides.
Yeah.
You can do columns, documentation, drag and drop, drag the words, fill in the blank, hotspots on images, find the hotspot, guess the answer, image hotspots, image juxtaposition, presentations, interactive video where people like click on things on top of videos, memory games, multiple choice, questionnaires, speak the words where you answer a question using your voice. I mean, it goes on and on and on what you can do with H5P.
Yeah, for the record, in the free H5P content plugin, in the free version of their library, there are 35 interactions.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And that includes drag and drop as well. That was one I don't think you had mentioned. They also have hotspot and multiple hotspot. So these are all able to be used directly in your LifterLMS lesson and quiz and question course, lesson, quiz, and question posts. All can have H5P interactions embedded in them, and typically with H5P, you're not going to report to any central location where you can actually make use of the data. You're not going to report content interactions into that. So what I've done in the LifterLMS xAPI plugin is include all of this so it actually gets sent out with your course, lesson, quiz, and question data. And again, just to reiterate, the next upcoming version will have H5P interactions controlling the mark complete button.
That's really cool. So there's all kinds of like things you can do here that aren't really possible with a WordPress post editor by itself. And Amy was just sharing a like a interactive game show, kind of like Jeopardy, that she creates.
Yeah, I think that's a template from Articulate, right, Amy?
Yeah, she said.
I recognize it right away.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's talk about, okay, if we're using H5P, if we're using Articulate to make interactive content, what LifterLMS xAPI does, it allows us to publish that inside of a LifterLMS lesson. Is that right?
Even more than that, Chris. You can publish multiple e-learning. You can publish a combination of any e-learning or H5P inside a lesson. Inside a single lesson, I could have I could have an H5P content, an interaction. I could then have a storyline course. I could then have a Captivate course, a Lectora course, an iSpring course, a Gomo course, you name it. There's all kinds of stuff. And then on top of that, with LifterLMS xAPI, I get to pick and choose which one of those interactive objects I want to choose to allow the Mark Complete button to be exposed. So you can actually do a whole mix and match of anything you want in a single lesson. I have one client who actually doesn't even develop lessons. They just put directly in their course start page. They directly put the content. They put it in the portion of the course start page that is for the enrolled user. So they don't even have any.
Gotcha.
Because they only care about the e-learning that they've developed that they want to be reported on. So they're not even reporting xAPI in the course or any lesson. They have no lessons developed. A single course with storyline embedded, a launch button that controls the completion button of the course.
That's very cool. And I think that's one of those terminology things that's helpful is when you first hear the word e-learning, you think maybe e-learning industry or something like that, that, you know, LifterLMS is a product in the e-learning industry. But in the world of authoring tools, when you can also use the word e-learning like a noun. So like we're going to put a piece of e-learning in this LifterLMS lesson. This might be a H5P interactive thing I designed, or it could be some e-learning content designed in Articulate. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there for those of you checking this out, that the word e-learning is also a noun and can apply. You can use the word to talk about a specific piece of content that you made or that's part of the learning journey.
That's true.
Well, let's talk about the reporting side. So we mentioned the benefits of sending that information, not storing it locally. Some things don't scale well on your rented server. So there's a reason to have an external, learning record store. So once you send that data from your site to your LRS, how do you like review it or run a report? What do you do?
Yeah, basically this with LifterLMS xAPI, because I've designed it to work with any LRS that is xAPI compliant or ADL compliant in a better term, which most of them are. But unless, in order to allow you to use any one that you wish, I have intentionally not created any reporting facility inside LifterLMS. You see, if I do that, that means I have to write code in LifterLMS for that LRS. And the problem with doing that is that if I write code for LRS manufacturer model A, then I have to write a whole new set of code for manufacturer model A for a different manufacturer model A, and so on and so forth. And the problem with doing that is that it's going to take too long to do. It will stop me from getting the good features that we all really care about out, because I'll be so busy writing aggregation code and then on top of that, just the amount of hours doing that, it just would not be financially viable for anybody to buy LifterLMS xAPI if I sat there and wrote it so it had specific code, reporting code for every possible LRS out there. So what happens is this. In the dashboard of LifterLMS, I simply provide you a window allowing you to go to that LRS and use its reporting facility. In the LifterLMS xAPI store page or web page on LifterLMS.com, if you scroll to the very bottom there, you will see 3 LRSs that I have certified LifterLMS xAPI against, and that list will build over time as I can gain access to even more LRSs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's the nature of being open, you know, and being LRS agnostic. That
well, that is true, and the other, if I may also mention, LifterLMS xAPI is pretty well the only product that is not designed around a specific LRS. For the most part, if you do any other LRS xAPI combination, they're going to force you to use LRS-A versus any LRS. Secondly, just to also make mention, by allowing you to run reports within a dashboard window rather than importing all the data into your LMS, you're not slowing down your LMS at all, not one iota. All the work is being done on the Learning Record Store server, all of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, those of you who are watching this live, if you have any questions, while you've got Dennis and myself here about LifterLMS and xAPI or certain areas you think we should explore, talk about, please feel free to leave a comment. When, Dennis, does it make sense to like move beyond just a more traditional WordPress post video lesson?
Good question. I will also, by the way, mention that LifterLMS xAPI also allows you to control the Mark Complete button for YouTube and Vimeo videos that you put into your embed URL field when you create a lesson.
Tell us more. Like, yeah. What kind of control do you get?
Basically, what you get is you are able to, if you turn on xAPI for that lesson or that lesson, because Lifter only has the embed URL in lessons. So if you turn on xAPI reporting for that lesson, your LifterLMS embedded video, whether it be a Vimeo video or a YouTube video. I haven't done the Wistia video yet. I may, but I haven't yet. But either way, video, YouTube or video or Vimeo embedded video. This is in your default lesson URL field that you put the video in, right? You know the one I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah, the featured video.
Right. So if you put a video URL in there and you turn on xAPI reporting in that lesson, what will happen is LifterLMS xAPI will automatically not allow the Mark Complete button to be displayed until the person has completed the video. With that, though, in the background, in the xAPI reporting, there's more information going on. If the person jumps ahead on the video, if they skip ahead, rewind, scrub, pause, play, do anything with that video, it's all being reported.
Yeah, that's great. I get that question from time to time where people are really concerned with compliance, and that's, for some people, that's their primary concern, is like, I need to make sure that they, like, for whatever reason, legal or that's just part of their certification, they have to prove that somebody watched the entire videos in the lesson or whatever. So
right. To actually lock down a video to the point where you have to prove that they actually watched the whole video, the only thing what I would suggest there is to remove the video play tools or something like that, because the problem there is that you don't want to confuse the reporting tool and the lesson completion tool with the video control tool. The player of the video, the video player is the thing that controls that aspect of it. And there's not a lot that we can do to override that. It's really becomes the responsibility of the company that provides that player.
Yeah, which is I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think of the various players. I mean, you can always like modify the code, or we've all seen those marketing videos where you can't pause the video and it auto plays and things like that. There are ways to, you know, put your requirements on the video itself. So
right, and that's going to end up being, you know, players that are specifically developed for that company. An example, the YouTube introduction videos that you can't skip for 5 seconds. That's a custom player that YouTube had developed.
Yeah, and I know some people, like when they're working with YouTube videos, they want to hide the related videos that show up at the end. So there's always like, you can look at the embed codes. There's just different ways to mess with what the player itself. And there's even other, I know there's other companies that make like, you know, players that you can put on top of players or whatever. So it's a rabbit hole a little bit. But
yeah, I'm not in that business. I'm not in the business of developing custom players.
Right.
I'll let those companies do their thing.
Yeah. What do you see as the?
Oh, sorry.
What do you see as?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
If I can just add one more thing as well. Another thing with videos and such, with LifterLMS xAPI, you don't have to only use the video embed URL. Let's say that I do want the mark complete to be controlled, but I have one lesson with 3 videos that I embedded via the media uploader, or that I linked to and put in an iframe. As long as those videos are YouTube or Vimeo at the moment, those videos will still allow you to control the mark complete button, even if they're not just put in, like if they're not the default LifterLMS video. I have a client that has multiple videos in a lesson. One of them is the embedded LifterLMS one, and then they have 2 other videos also embedded in the same lesson. And until all those videos are completed, the mark complete button does not show up. Yeah,
that's super cool. And Mark in the comments is giving you a shout out saying how awesome you've been with xAPI and support and helping him with your product. So
thanks, Mark.
Thanks for the shout out, Mark. Cool. What do you see as kind of the gateway, the first step into xAPI? What causes somebody to tip over to be like, oh, you know, a WordPress LMS is not enough. I need something more. What is that? What is usually like the gateway drug or the you know, the door that opens into that world? Is it interactive content? Is it the need for like to have multiple LMSs pointing to one LRS, or like what tips people when people first show up on the scene in xAPI? Why are they there?
Well, that's a very good question. Typically, you know, I guess the standard user case is going to be that they're going to realize that no matter what they do in a standard WordPress post, it's just not going to be as rich an experience as they can have with a third-party tool. That would be the most common reason. Beyond that, they also may, the secondary reason may not necessarily be like the sharing of content amongst LMSs. I would say the second reason would be compliance reasons. This person must have completed this before they can move on. So the hiding of the mark, or not the hiding, but the disabling of the mark complete until that content that they've got in the lesson, that richer, more interactive content that they've got embedded in the lesson, would now have to identify that it has been completed before the lesson itself can give the move on criteria. And move on criteria, by the way, means it's the equivalent of clicking mark complete, allowing mark complete.
Very cool. Sean has a comment which is interesting about one thing that piques his interest is the ability to import courses from other vendors for his students. So
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the publisher's mindset. Like maybe I'm a course creator, I make courses, but I mean, are there like people out there or companies that make courses that are xAPI compatible that make it easy to be published on other sites?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a good example. You've got a lot of these CDNs, these content development networks.
I've heard Mark Mark, who's in the audience, say that the e-learning industry has a lot of 3-letter acronyms. So
yeah, there are a lot. Yeah. Beginning with ISD.
So sorry, I just had to put a little comic relief in there, but go ahead on your example there with the CDNs.
Yeah, just to give you an example, you've got these well, not even necessarily. Yeah, okay. You've got these CDNs sitting out there in the world. CDN is typically in our environment is a content distribution network. Okay, I know there's also the content development network, and I may have said that earlier by accident. A content distribution network. So lynda.com.
Okay.
Uses a content distribution network to distribute their videos as courses. Now, lynda.com has a number of different levels of integration with their products. If I wanted to go and communicate with lynda.com, asking them if I could rent 100 user licenses of their course, of course A,
and display it on my site.
That's correct. They would probably tell me, in fact, here's a URL to access it, here's your user key, and here's your secret key to access it. Those 3 things alone tell me I'm connecting to their system in an xAPI world. So now I'm going to take this single file that lynda.com is going to give me. The single file is going to break all the rules that SCORM implied upon us. That single file is going to be called tincan.xml. It's going to be an XML file, which we all may have heard of by now. An XML file, in that XML file, it's going to basically have all the rules related to how do I run this course on my LMS, yet get that video from lynda.com to run in my course on my LMS. But it's streaming from their CDN. From the lynda.com CDN. So what happens is they give me a single file. I simply upload that into my LMS. It's going to be an xAPI file, I guarantee it. So it's going to be called tincan.xml. So I upload that into my LMS, and that's it. The end. I now make a button or put the lynda.com video in an iframe, put that course in iframe, and bingo bango, it's just working. That's all there is. And when it comes time for lynda.com to serve that video through my LMS into that course, no problem. It just happens. Now, another thing about that is that we've just talked about lynda.com bringing their video through our LMS. Yes, that can happen, but it's not limited to that. Lynda.com can also directly stream that video into a mobile device if that person is not connected or logged into the LMS running that same course.
Wow, that's really amazing. Yeah, when you first told me about that, it was really it's really mind-blowing to me that that's even possible. and you know, how that you can take a course from somewhere else and rent access to it basically and publish it on your site. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Just to let you know, here's a slightly different example where you've got one course, and this is going to be using Storyline in this example.
Okay.
Storyline, whether it be Storyline or Captivate, is irrelevant. I'm just using Storyline as the example. So I've got a Storyline course, and in my Storyline course, I've got a number of web objects in my Storyline slides. For those of you who know Storyline, you'll know what those are. So I've got a web object. One is a video coming from lynda.com. Another is a web page coming from Google. Another is like a predefined Google search that shows different results. Another is a static web page coming from wherever else. That's the beauty of xAPI as well. Without that, you cannot create a Storyline course that brings different learning objects in from all kinds of different sources around the world. LifterLMS xAPI works the same way. It allows LifterLMS to bring in those objects from anywhere else in the world and start reporting on them, just like Storyline does it as well.
Wow, that's really fascinating. How, like, if I wanted to go shopping for, you know, xAPI compatible courses, like besides lynda.com, do you have any ideas, or what would I Google for if I wanted to like browse course catalogs, whether that's in safety training or like, you know, professional workplace compliance courses or health and fitness or whatever? Like, where do I go to like find these course catalogs of courses that already exist?
Well, that's actually a very good question. In reality, if the courses are kept up to date, you don't care you don't necessarily have to go looking specifically for anything public, anyone that develops for xAPI, because those companies, unless they have some proprietary hand-coded course, almost every publishing facility out there today, almost every courseware development environment like Articulate and such, the course itself is ubiquitous of the published output. It's only how they republish the course that makes it xAPI or not. It's not the content in the course, how it's designed, anything like that. You can take the same course, publish it for SCORM, publish it for AICC, or publish it for xAPI. You can also just publish it for web, so that it doesn't report anything. It's the same course in the end. So you don't have to specifically go seeking courses that were developed for xAPI. You just look for the course that you want on the subject matter you want, and then you just ask, you know, maybe use the contact form. Hey, I like this course. Can I get it in xAPI?
That's awesome. Sean has a question about using the example of lynda.com. If hypothetically, if he were to work out a deal and publish one of their courses on his site, will the quizzes come with the course?
Again, if you're going to make a deal with lynda.com, you've got to have them provide you an xAPI file, that tincan.xml file. That's all that they're going to give you. Okay, you're going to zip that file, even though it's a single file. You're going to zip it, and you're going to upload it into the system. That will make the course run from within your LMS. But the video, I can guarantee you, lynda.com is going to have the video stream from their server. It's going to be just no different than uploading any other xAPI package, any other xAPI course. But again, you've got to let lynda.com know that you want to have their lesson or their course in xAPI format to run it from your platform, and they'll know right away that it's serving the videos from their system. Rastiki has a very similar product, but it costs about, if I recall correctly, it starts at about $300 a month or something like that. And then that's not the content, that's you sharing courses. And that's SCORM. I think it's only SCORM as well.
Gotcha. What if I start getting into the authoring tools and let's say I have a LifterLMS xAPI style website and I want to like give somebody approaches me and they're like, hey, I love your course. can I, you know, basically buy it or rent it for 100 seats for a year? What would I do to get, like, how would I give them the course? How would I create that XML file?
Yeah, in the case of LifterLMS, if you're talking about distributing your lessons, is that what you're describing?
Well, I guess Lifter has a, you know, an export tool, but that's more just for post content. But if I have, let's just say I create a course all in Articulate.
Okay.
And somebody approaches me, how would I give them a year of access for 100 seats or whatever?
Okay, to give them a year of access for a specific number of seats, you're going to have to do that through some sort of like maybe LifterLMS vouchers or something. So that would have to be done that way, or through some sort of monitoring system there. xAPI doesn't do that. xAPI simply allows that course to be distributed to them and talk to their LRS. Or they can talk to your LRS as well. It's irrelevant, like whichever one. I guess if you want to monitor the 100 seats, what you would probably do there would be to run, to give them a storyline course, or give them access to one storyline course you have out on the web. Because all they have to do is put in the URL and put in a couple of other, put in 3 URLs, and they're done. That's all they have to do. It's a little bit complex in the sense that the course is one object. Monitoring or not monitoring, but managing the number of accesses or the number of users allowed to use it. That's got to be a different system to do that. As I was saying earlier, SCORM.com has that facility. It's called SCORM Dispatch, but it is SCORM Dispatch. And it costs like $300 a month. I know some clients who are paying upwards of $900 a month to distribute their centralized content on other LMS systems. Where LifterLMS xAPI, if you just simply put your course out on the web to a location that their LMS can access it, you can then use your LRS to not necessarily stop them from exceeding the 100 users, but at least monitoring that they haven't exceeded the 100 users.
Very cool, very cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that would be done through reporting. But again, you can't really block it. The way to maybe block it would be to simply block access to the course. So when people go to open the course, it's going to say you're blocked.
Gotcha. What you do, like custom WordPress work, you do custom LifterLMS and xAPI work. What types of like custom development do you get into? Like what is what's your, like what's when it comes to LifterLMS xAPI or xAPI in general, like what do clients out there like need help with? Which part of it, or is it all of it?
In general, the majority of the work that I've done is usually going to be surrounding the registration aspect or the payment aspects or membership related aspects. The work that I prefer to focus on is all around xAPI within LifterLMS. But I've pretty well run the gamut with LifterLMS. I think I've touched every aspect of LifterLMS itself. And for those of you in this meeting right now, today I just put out a new free plugin on learningtemplates.com. And this is that one to add the filtering columns into the lesson quiz and questions of LifterLMS admin pages, so that you can now filter your information in the admin pages to reduce the amount of records that you see, of data that you see.
That's awesome.
To give you an example, that's one plugin. There are many. You can go to LifterLMS. You can go to learning-templates.com to see all the plugins. They're all free. I've got a couple Like we've got a couple of small paid plugins for LifterLMS, but the majority are free.
Yeah, if you're watching this or checking out the replay later, check out Dennis at learning-templates.com, where he's got his various products and his services, where he helps do custom work. On that note, I think there's another role in our space called the instructional designer. What do those people do?
Well, I am.
And what do you?
Sorry, continue.
No, that's what I know you are. So I'm just trying to like help people when they hear these terms like xAPI developer, WordPress developer, instructional designer. What are these? How do you kind of make sense of it all, or how do you help, especially with that instructional designer piece? What does the instructional designer do?
Well, to make a long story short, an instructional designer solves a problem for an organization or a group. They solve the problem by analyzing what's wrong with what's happening now. So they go through an analysis phase, and in that phase, training is not necessarily the only solution. Okay, that I can tell you that I've seen it many times myself, and I've come to that conclusion myself many times when I've worked for either the UN or when I worked in the 911 world throughout the US. Training is not always the right solution to solve a problem. An instructional designer.
Let's go down a rabbit hole just for a second.
Sure.
Can you give us an example of where people are trying to kind of force, or where a business or an organization may think training is the answer, but it's not? What was the answer instead?
I've lived the experience with a
okay.
Yeah, with a large railroad company here in North America. There was a situation where the supervisors are regional, and then they've got kind of local, the way the railway industry works. So they've got these supervisors who were really quite out of touch with what was required to complete the work in the field properly, what resources were required, what kind of timeline was required. The railroad had a lot of rules. They had a lot of procedures. Everything was all done, but the procedures were kind of out of date. And I can tell you firsthand, because I saw them, they just weren't right. Bottom line was, in that particular case, what the issue was that what we were trying to resolve was that the supervisors needed to be trained to get up to speed on what the various roles of people in the field needed to do, when they needed to do it, what they needed to have to be prepared to do their jobs, and what a proper job looked like upon completion. So there were 4 issues that supervisors were failing at in every case. And these were people who were historically in the field, but there was this mix of new younger people who were more technology oriented and didn't really have that rail industry background. So they didn't know what the proper picture looked like. So there was a different group, 2 groups of people that were supervisors dealing with 4 sets of issues that were happening in the field and that were not properly being dealt with at the supervisory level. You can only train so much. The bottom line was, when I was doing the analysis of that scenario, of that issue, the simple solution was get the supervisors into the field, get them working side by side with those technical people who were doing the work, and then have them come back and then do some training later, but not before. Step 1, get them in the field. They weren't getting the supervisors into the field. They were sitting behind desks. That was the number 1 issue.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, I think we're going to need to we should do a bigger webinar one of these days and get into some more topics here. For those of you listening right now, you can check out LifterLMS xAPI on the lifterlms.com website. And then check out Dennis's site over at learning-templates.com. And he's got some free plugins over there and some other paid plugins. and his services there. So I'd encourage everybody to check that out. I want to thank you so much, Dennis, for doing this live and having a conversation around this. I think it's a really important topic because the learning industry, especially the online learning industry, it's evolving quickly, but it also has a deep history. And when you get into e-learning and where xAPI came from and how it's evolving and it's going through these iterations like ADL to SCORM to xAPI, solving new problems, getting better over time, moving forward, and really almost in the same spirit as WordPress, being open so that it's really flexible. It can do all these different things, which also comes with challenges, just like WordPress. It can be used in a simple way or it can be used in a complex way. So it's a really powerful tool. I really appreciate what you've done with making it work with Lifter, and so you can kind of get the best of both worlds of WordPress LMS and also tap into the entire universe that is xAPI. So we're going to have to do this again. And if anybody has any questions at all about LifterLMS or xAPI, if it's a good fit, or you just have questions about anything you heard in this call, feel free to jump on over to lifterlms.com/contact. And there's a form there. You can send us an email. Thank you to our live audience for attending and the good conversation there and asking questions as we go. We really appreciate it. And Dennis, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.